Alright guys, I'm going to go over Firestarter 17. So this video is going to give you the answers to Firestarter 17. Basically, this is going to finish out the notes that we started in class the other day. So the big thing with this kind of way where things are going is I didn't get to cover as much in class as I wanted to. Give you as many examples to show you how to do what it's doing. And that's what this is basically about. So remember we talked about standard form. None of these will use standard form. Alright, so if you use standard form today, you're doing something wrong. Standard form has no parentheses in the problem. That's how you know it's in standard form. Vertex form has one set of parentheses. We have a dirty H, cool K. Remember the reason we call it dirty H is we know to change the sign inside the parentheses. Intercept form has two sets of parentheses, dirty P, dirty Q. Alright, these are the steps. We're going to follow these steps every time. This will be on the board whenever you have a quiz, which will probably come up relatively soon. I'm sure we'll have one before the 9 weeks end, so over graphing. So that's what's coming up. Now, first thing we're going to do is going to go over some definitions. This is just stuff like I didn't get to cover in class. My first thing is, what is a quadratic function? A quadratic function is a function with the variable to the second power the highest exponent. So the highest exponent is 2. That's squared. The graph is always a parabola, right? That's a big thing. Just remember, the parabola is every graph is a parabola. Vertex form is a quadratic function in the form. So I'm going to put QF because I don't feel like writing out quadratic function again. So QF just stands for quadratic function in the form y equals a x minus h squared plus k. So basically, one set of parentheses, and the parentheses are squared. Alright, so that's the variable to the second power. See, the x actually is the second power, so because if you simplified it, it would go to the, you would end up writing the two parentheses out, writing the one set of parentheses squared into 2 and then squaring it using FOIL. It would eventually make that letter squared. Alright, so to remember dirty H, remember we have a dirty H and a cool K. Intercept form. So intercept form is a quadratic function. So once again, QF stands for quadratic function in the form y equals a x minus p x minus q. So this one has two sets of parentheses. Alright, x-intercepts are points that cross the x-axis. Basically, the y value always equals 0. Alright, in intercept form, P and Q give x-intercepts, where P is an x-intercept with a y0, and that's an and symbol, Q 0. Y-intercept form, or y-intercept is a point that crosses the y-axis. This time the x value must be equal to 0. In vertex form, there's not in vertex form, I don't know if I'm saying that. In your XY chart, choose x equals 0 to find the y-intercept. So they are slightly different. Alright, that's it. Okay, we're going to finish the notes that you guys were given in class. So you should have a hard copy of these. These are on your blue paper if you don't want to do it on like separately. But step 1, these are in vertex form, so I know because there's one set of parentheses, one set of parentheses. So step 1, and I'm just going to put S1 because I don't feel like writing out step 1. I'm going to find H and K. So A, H, and K. I want you to actually write out H and K. I know some people are going to do this. Some people are going to say A, H, and K. That doesn't tell me if you understand that the signs need to be switched or not. So I'll actually write out the next step. So A is positive 1. Number H is 2 that it looks like, but remember that dirty H is hanging out with our X in the room, so we can't trust them. It's actually negative 2. K is going to be negative 3. So that means my step 2, so if you look here, this is where we're at right now. We did this. Step 2, I'm going to find the vertex. The vertex is really easy. It's just H, then K. So step 2 says the vertex is negative 2, negative 3. So I just go left 2, down to 3, I put a dot. Right, I will put my dotted line there. Remember, that is not part of the original graph. That is just called the axis of symmetry. It's just there for reference later. If you use your graph to reflect your points, it might be more helpful. I like to use a bigger XY chart, so you can use either the smaller XY chart. So if you use this one right here, you just have to use the points on the graph to get your other 2 points. This one I'm going to use the rainbow effect on my XY chart. I like that a little bit better, just easier for me, but it doesn't matter which one you do. Either way, we'll get the same 5 points. So now I'm going to make my XY chart. And like I said, I like to use a bigger XY chart, and I put negative 2, negative 3 in the middle. Now I add 1 to get negative 1, I add another 1 to get 0, I take 1 away, I take 1 away. Alright. So now I'm going to plug my points in. So I'm going to plug in 0 for X. So right here I'm going to put in 0. Say y equals 0 plus 2 squared minus 3. So I got to do inside the parentheses first. 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. So 0, 1. Now I'm going to rainbow that over and put 1 there. So I already know that's there. If you don't want to do the bigger XY chart, so maybe you only have these 3 points, right? You would put 0, 1 on your graph, and then you would reflect it. I'd say I'm 2 dots away from the dotted line, 2 dots, and I'm going to do 2 dots away from the other side from the dotted line, so that's where my dot should be. So if you put this green dot here, right here, right, that can be from my work on the XY chart where I got negative 4, 1, or it could be from using the smaller XY chart and reflecting it across. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but this time I'm going to plug in negative 1. So we'll say this purple writing is going to be me plugging in negative 1. So the purple writing is me plugging in negative 1. Y equals, instead of X, I'm going to put negative 1 plus 2 squared minus 3. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So this whole first chunk turns into 1. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. So I put negative 2 here, negative 2 there. Now remember, that's the rainbow that lets me do that. Once again, so I'm going to go left 1 down to 2. Put a dot. If you want to use the dotted line, you can do that as well. So the purple dots could come from either me using the rainbow effect or not. Now I'm going to make my graph. Remember, it's supposed to be a U. I'm going to do the best I can on the screen. It's not too bad. Remember, it's got to have arrows because it goes up forever. Right? And that's it for the first example. Alright, next one. Exact. So I know once again this is vertex form since there's one set of parentheses. So I know that's my A. So that's my A. That's my H. And that's my K. Once again, don't get in the habit of doing your A, H, and K like this, because that's where people are going to get into trouble, and they're not going to be able to get partial credit because they're not going to be able to tell me if you understand how that A is actually negative 1, not just a negative sign. So A is negative 1. H is not just negative 1, because remember, it's a dirty H hanging out with our X. It's actually positive 1. and K is cool, so we trust them, they're 5. Right? So, now I'm going to graph that. So I know step 2 says my vertex is at, so is it going to be at 1, positive 5. Now remember, I already know that that right there tells me that my graph is going to be a frowny face. So if at the end of this graph my graph's not a frowny face, I know I made a mistake. So I go right 1, I go up to 5, I'm going to put a dot. There's my dotted line. Right? So I'm just going to put dotted line there. Remember, that is not part of the graph, it's just there for reference. Alright, go straight up and down. At least pretend it goes straight up and down, since I suck at making that dotted line. X, Y. Alright, now I'm gonna put 1, 5 in the middle. I'm gonna add 1 to get 2. I'm gonna add 1 to get 3. I'm gonna subtract 1, subtract 1. Right? So now I'm gonna plug it in. So the red writing is gonna be plugging in. I'm gonna plug in 0. So I'm gonna plug in 0. So I'm gonna say y equals negative 0 minus 1 squared plus 5. I get negative 1 squared plus 5. Negative 1 squared is 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, so I end up with 4. So I put 4 here. If you plugged in 2 and rotated, you could have rainbowed it the other direction. That's totally fine. So I go 0 up to 4. I put a dot. If you didn't want to use the rainbow, you could have reflected over using the dotted line on the graph. Now I'm going to plug in 3. So I plugged in 3 this time, so I'm going to rainbow that way. So the purple writing is me plugging in 3. Y equals negative 3 minus 1 squared plus 5. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So I get negative 4 plus 5, which is 1. So I put 1 there, which 1 goes there. So I go right 3 up to 1. I could reflect on the dotted line, or I can go left 1 up to 1. Either way is acceptable. Now I'm going to make my graph. That's a sucky graph. Let's try it again. It sucked again. I'm going to try. That's a little better. Right? Remember, it goes down forever. So this goes down forever, just like we thought. So therefore, it is it's an upside down U, just like we thought in the beginning. So that's it for these two. Alright, this next one is another vertex form because it has one set of parentheses, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. So A is 1/2. So that tells me that it's going to be a regular shaped U, and actually it's going to tell me it's going to be a little bit wider than normal. H is going to be positive 3. K is going to be negative 4. So my step 2, my vertex is at 3, negative 4. So I go right 3, I go down to 4, I put a dot. There's my dotted line. Remember, it's not part of the graph, it's just there for reference. Now I'm going to do my XY chart. Remember, I like a bigger XY chart, so I make a 5-point XY chart, put 3 in the middle, I add 1, I subtract 1, I subtract 1. Alright, if you ever want to double check and see if you did H correctly, just plug it in. It should spit out negative 4. If it doesn't, you probably messed up somewhere. So now I'm going to plug in 2 and 1, or you could plug in 4 and 5, it doesn't matter. So the green writing will be me plugging in, I'll plug in 4. So y equals 1/2 4 minus 3 squared minus 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. 1 squared is 1 times 1/2, so I get 1/2 minus 4, which is y equals negative 3.5. Right? So if that bothers you, you don't have to use that point. You can always pick a new point if it bothers you. Now I'm going to plug in 5. So the purple line is going to be plugging in 5. Y equals 1/2 5 minus 3 squared minus 4. 5 minus 3 is 2, so I get 1/2 times 2 squared minus 4. 2 squared is 4 times 1/2 is 2. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. So I get negative 2 here. I rainbow that over. Boom. Right? Those are my points. Now remember, you could always do your reflection on the graph itself. I didn't because I like doing it on the XY chart. So I go over 1, down 2. I go over 5, down 2. Right? I go right 2 down to 3.5. If it bothers you that 3.5's there, don't graph it. Pick a new point. Pick like I pick negative 1 or 7. Then I go right 4 down to 3.5. Right now we have my graph. If I can make a nice one, we'll see. So that's closer. Close enough. All right. It's an upside down U. It's a little bit wider than I thought. Looks good. All right. That's it for that one. Now the next one's going to be vertex form, so it's going to be a little bit different. And I don't know, I said vertex form, the next one's going to be intercept form. Why is it intercept form? Because it has two sets of parentheses. So we have two sets of parentheses. So the step one, we're going to be finding A, P, and Q. So A is going to be 2, P is going to be -3, Q is going to be +1. Remember, this is a dirty P, and that's a dirty Q. We can't trust either one of them. So that one looks like +3, we changed it to -3. Looks like -1, we changed it to +1. All right. Step 2, we find the vertex. So step 2 says find the vertex. So I have to use this. I say x equals, in parentheses, -3 plus 1 all over 2. I end up with -2 all over 2, which is -1. That's the middle of my XY chart. So this is the middle of your XY. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm making an XY chart. I put -1 in the middle. Now I'm also going to put -3. I'm also going to put +1. The good news is I never have to do any work for P and Q. If I did this right, I just put 0 right there. So I can go -3, put a 0, +1, put a 0. Now my dotted line, this is also my dotted line up and down right here. So because of -1, it's also going to tell me my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to go to -1 and put an up and down dotted line. And notice every time you do that, that should be right in the middle of P and Q. If it's not, you messed up somewhere. All right. So the only work I have to do for this one is I just have to plug in -1. So I say y equals 2 in parentheses, -1 plus 3, -1 minus 1. I end up with 2 times -2. All right. I end up with 4 times -2, which is -8. So -8. So I go left 1 down to 8, put a dot. And now I'm going to connect my dots. That is a really bad graph. I struggle with the graph on the computer, guys. I apologize. It's a little bit better, not much. Now, that is an upside down U, just like I thought. I mean, a regular U, just like I thought. Always double check that, especially in intercept form. Seems to be there's more mistakes on the one graph you have to do. So that's it for Firestarter, or that's it for this one. Today's keyword is not just one, it is a phrase that you're going to type out. So in the private comments, to get credit for this, type out, attendance at home must be turned in on time. Attendance at home must be turned in on time. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I see you in person. Alright, so now we have vertex form. And I guess I'm going to lie to you again, because it's not vertex form, it's intercept form, because we have two sets of parentheses. I don't know why I have vertex form on my brain. So step 1, I'm going to find A equals -1/3. P equals -6. Remember, it's an opposite of that. Q equals +4. Remember, it's the opposite of that. Step 2, use the vertex formula for intercept form. Don't use the vertex formula for standard form. So I'm going to say -6 plus 4 all over 2. Make sure it's in parentheses if you're going to do it in your calculator. -6 plus 4 is -2 all over 2, which is -1. So that's the middle of my XY chart. So I should have a dotted line at the middle of my XY chart. Alright? Now I'm going to make my XY chart. I'm going to put -6 on my graph. I'm going to put -1 in the middle, because that's the middle of my XY chart. And then I'm going to put +4. If you want to check your work, -6 and 4 should be 0. Now I'm going to plug in -1. So I'm going to say y equals -1/3 times -1 plus 6, -1 minus 4. I get negative 1/3 times 5 times negative 5. So I get negative 1/3 times negative 25. So negative 1/3 times negative 25. It's going to give me 8 1/3. So 8 1/3 positive. And that's okay. I just left it as 8 1/3. Sometimes you have to deal with a fraction, guys. And that's the only thing I can do is deal with that. Alright, so now I'm going to go left one. I'm going to go up to 8 1/3. So I'm just going to go a little bit less than half. There's my graph. There's my dotted line. Now I'm going to go left 6, 0. This is a good example of why it's very helpful to go 4, 0. To only use the points that I had, the minimum amount of points here. Because now I don't deal with any fractions except for that green dot. I remember, but it's got to be a u. And it's got to be a symmetrical u. There's my u there. Not too bad. And it should look, that told me it should have been an upside down u. Looks pretty good. That's going to finish our graph. Alright. And there was a keyword in here, so if you missed it, you messed up.